A very beautiful morning to you this beautiful Saturday. What a way to start the weekend. Amazing weather here in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, Nigeria, where we'll come to you live, giving you all the amazing things. First thing first, my name is Anita Patrick. And of course, you know what the weekend looks like. Amazing stuff lined up for you to spice up your weekend and give you that great start into relaxation. For those of you who have the time to relax, and for you working as well, great time and just stretch your legs and clear your head a bit. It is Global Morning, of course. As always, I won't do this alone as I have my co-anchor with me in the studio in person of Mukhtar Kasim.
Good morning, Anita Patrick.
Morning.
Like you said, it's a beautiful morning and the weather is really nice. So it's a time for our viewers to relax and watch Global Morning as we give them an amazing masterpiece like we always do on the weekend.
Yes, amazing masterpiece as we always bring on the weekend. And you know what it's like. It's the time to relax. Like we mentioned, try and get on set, sit in front of the screen and enjoy this particular moment. But like we always do, we have newspaper review segments on our rundown.
We also have got taste and texture. We'll bring to you breakfast.
Breakfast, so you can sit very well and watch.
So that you can have the strength.
You can pay attention.
To have a great day and watch Global Morning. Of course, we've got our discussion. Very
timely, of course, very timely discussion that needs to we need to check our conscience and also call ourselves to order in terms of responsible as a citizen. That's one of the things like for you.
We always talk about responsibility. We think it's about the government.
No, it's not
like
actually.
We've always reiterated it is a collective effort as citizens and as government. So we have got to be responsible to your government.
Sure.
As much as you want the government to be responsible to you. And of course, we have discussions coming about the flood season. It's already rainy season.
Yeah.
We have got to be proactive in trying to make sure that we prevent the recurring decimal of flooding in Nigeria. So that discussion will also come your way.
That will also come your way because, like I remember, the Vice President gave a directive asking for everyone to pay attention to the climax at which the rain is getting very heavy. Now we've seen that across states.
And of course, the NIMET has given some predictions about certain states are the most vulnerable. So all those attentions, we've got to have that conversation to avert this disaster that occurs every single rainy season in Nigeria.
Very true. That's one of the things we need to look out for. And then we need to look at, we'll be telling you something around humanitarian crisis, how well have they been coping after the encounters over the years. It's a lot of concern because we know, of course, what leads to that here in Nigeria. We'll find a way to find a balance where these humans who have had this breakdown of displacement and lost their ancestral homes and loved ones, how they're picking up back and getting themselves set for the new phase of life on which life has presented to them. Well, all of this is lined up for you today, and of course you can't afford to miss out on this conversation and want to sit tight. Don't go anywhere. That remote should still be in your hands and stay straight to the screen on Global TV and stay with us. Sip a tea before we give you the idea of what you should have for breakfast. You can take coffee as well. But let's quickly tell you that we'll bring you first and first the stories making the headways on the front page covers of the dailies. Please stay with us.
It's great to have you back on Global Morning, and of course, this is the newspaper review segment where we bring to you all of the biggest stories making the rounds on our dailies. And we've got quite a number of newspapers. We've got the Nation's newspaper, we've got the Saturday Independent, we've got the Guardian, Punch, and a whole lot of other papers. But we begin with the Saturday Independent newspaper. And the Saturday Independent newspaper begins with a business story. It says multiple charges squeeze Nigerians, and it has got a rider that says increased deduction fees, outrage, threaten cashless policy. And all of the stories you're going to find on page 8 of the Saturday Independent newspaper. I'm sure Anita, all of us can relate to those squeeze and charges that we have from all of these banks.
Sometimes when you see some alert and you're thinking it's credit, and then you turn back to see it's a debit alert from charges, and you're asking yourself, what charges is this?
25 naira,
you see 50 naira,
you see 100. All kind, and it's not only one bank, most of the banks are actually guilty. So I don't know why the central bank has not swooped into put a regulation on this, because it's, if you think it's just 15 naira or 20, but if you look at the number of customers that they have and you accumulate that amount, it amounts to a whole lot of billions. And for me, that's not really right. So
because if citizens are looking at the bank for safekeeping of their money, or also on the return on investment, kind of like you're putting money to save, get little interest here and there, and then you get debit charges on little charges, of course it calls for concern. It's not the first time Nigerians are talking about this, and we hope that the CBN will look into that particular case. And
if they don't, people might be forced to take the money and put it on their rather than.
But in the long run, it's not going to be safe. It's going to get rotten in the long run. All of those concerns.
Safest bet, but we hope they just do the right thing and put the regulations in place.
Well,
and enforce them, of course.
Yes, enforcement should also take place. But let's go above the nameplate of the Saturday Independent newspaper, where it talks about appeal court overturns Oyo High Court judgments, reinstates hijab ban at ISIS Ibadan. That story is on page 7 of the Saturday Independent paper, just at the left-hand corner there of the Saturday Independent, and just beside that as well, there's another story there where it says Auntie Remy, why now? How one comments about Akara grants dignity of labor set social media ablaze. Story on page 21 of the Saturday Independent.
The week. And of course, we've heard statement and defense of that statement. But someone said there's no harm in having a little beginning. You can start from small and grow. But then other people have had other comments.
The social media has actually been ablaze, because we've seen even AI not helping as well.
Everyone has joined the trend.
Because it is the way of starting small. So everyone is calling for each friends and family to patronize the business. And
one thing about Nigerians again is that we always find humor in every serious situation. That's why I think we've been able to go through the hard times. But then away from that particular story, let's go below the big story and tell you a story here that says we must resist amplifying terrorist activities above national interest. Tinubu urges media. That is President Tinubu speaking, and that story you find details on page 4 of the Saturday Independent newspaper. Of course, we know the role that the media plays in every democracy. They are the fourth realm of the estate, and they have to hold the government accountable.
Yes.
And of course, painting the right picture is also very important, because some of these terrorists, if you do not downplay their activities, it seems to give them a bravado that allows them to even continue with their dastardly acts.
And of course, it's always good to have good narratives to storytelling, because one thing is good to tell the story about difficult situation and guide the government, also putting them on their toes in terms of accountability, and also ensuring that they give back the dividends of democracy to the people. But at the same time, when you put out stories, you need to also remember that these are stories that will guide the audience into what they should think and not think. So media, of course, I like the fact that national interest is very important. It's very key because that affects everyone and across all sectors of the economy. So we need to also watch as journalists in terms of
kind
our
of
narratives
and
what we need to, we want to get the headlines, the catchy headlines and all that.
Well, of course there are ethics in journalism,
there are ethics
so we
that
should
need
not
to follow.
discard those ethics.
Of course. Well, let's move away from that story. Just beside the president's picture there, it talks about the African Democratic Congress. Well, I like the way this their logos talks about it. It talks about the solution to what they want. But let's start with the story that ADC demands independent probe into PFIPC scandal, wants Tinubu to set up judicial commission to look into that.
That scandal is one that has actually dominated. Someone saying he was appointed by the president, and and the presidency has come out to debunk him. But people have asked, if you did not appoint this person, how come he has a budget in the appropriation for the year, this fiscal year? So it's a whole lot. And for the government, I feel this is a litmus test for them to show that they are really serious about the fight against anti-graft and all of that. So that independent probe is something that will be really important at this particular point in time.
So let's look at and hope that they pay attention to that, and of course that call is yield to. Well,
and away from that story, let's just go below it. Here's a story that says a bit of security. It says 50 days in captivity. Oyo's abducted pupil, teachers still missing, questions mount. Details you find on page 30 of the Saturday Independent newspaper. Well,
beside that story, you have a picture of a man wearing a suit and wondering what he's talking about. Well, it's talked about the Sunki O effect, curating the future of African luxury lifestyle storytelling. We're talking about narratives and storytelling. Well, this is also a way of telling you how things walk around,
of luxury and
lifestyle, telling the story of how you can walk through that part. Well, that story is on page 9. Away from that, at the bottom plate of the Saturday Independent newspaper, it says SEC, that's Security Exchange Commission, clears 7 new fintech firms for ARIP, that's ARIP. That story is on page 4 of the Saturday Independent. That brings us the wrap of
stories we're making the rounds on the Saturday Independent newspaper.
Of course, let's quickly turn our focus and take our next paper for the day. Let's quickly get to the Nation newspaper. The Nation newspaper has its own lead story, and this time around it's a different story. It talks about insiders behind Adeyemi's scheme to be identified, prosecuted. That's presidency speaking there. And we have riders accompanying this story. This lead story says collaborators within government institutions helped alleged fraud flourish. Another one says insists presidency detected scam, rejects attempts to implicate Gbajabiamila. And we also have another that says NDC raises questions over accounts, orders 6 sanctions. All of that is on page 4 of the Nation newspaper, of course.
And away from that story, we're still sticking with other stories. This one says how Yahoo boys stole 7.2 million naira from George's account by EFCC chair. And details you find on page 3 of the Nation's newspaper.
Okay, anyway, let's move. I don't want to dwell on that. There's a picture story where we talked about the issue on the media, where we see the president and the first lady exchanging handshake there. It says, put Nigeria first, don't amplify terrorists. Tinubu tells the media. It says, press freedom comes with responsibility, of course, and that story is on page 3 thereabouts.
Now let's take you above the nameplate to the left-hand corner. It says special investigator demands trial of Buhari Mustafa over alleged $62 million fraud. And you find details on page 5 of the Nation's newspaper.
And of course, just at the right-hand corner, right there, not left-hand, right-hand corner there, it talks about Osun 2026. With the build-up, it says IGP meets Adeleke, parties reads the Riot Act, and says wanted criminals hiding in government house. Story on page 6. I'm sure that's why the IGP had to sit down with the governor.
Most definitely, of course, it's all a multi-stakeholder approach in having successful elections. So we hope that meeting will translate to a peaceful poll in Osun State. But let's take you below to the bottom, and by the left-hand corner, you see a story here that says court to arraign Saraki over alleged defamatory statement against Abdul Razak. And he has got a rider. The rider says, the rider there is still talking about the story. He says, former senator hasn't appealed for the particular case. So all of the stories you find on page 25 of the Nation's newspaper.
And just beside that, we have a very sad one there, talking about child trafficking and the concern, how people, it seems like consciences are getting out of hand, a lot of people losing their conscience.
Honestly.
And there it says, I sold my friend's son for 1.3 million naira. And that's the suspected child trafficker speaking there. Suspected child trafficker, but for me, if this is really happening, it's really
sad.
Sad that you can't. I remember those days growing up, you could trust friends, neighbors, but if this is becoming,
if this person is described as the friend, so that child might actually seem like a second father,
uncle,
someone close to him
or something.
And that's why that conversation about trust and how it has been eroded is very timely, because most of us tend to betray the trust that has been entrusted, because children are a trust for you and everyone around them. So why would you go sell your friend's child? How much is that money? Is that going to solve your poverty? Is that going to solve poverty? Honestly, it's a terrible one.
It's a terrible one, and we hope that it doesn't become a trend, because it's really something that causes concerns worrisome as well. Let's move away from that story and tell you that's the story beside that story. There says appeal court halts hijab use in Ibadan International School, and of course there's a whole lot of story, and then it says there's a rider there that talks about the use of it and how that will start from Monday.
As the enforcement
July.
order.
Yes, Monday, July the 6th. That's what that will play out fully. But let's also tell you that makes up the stories on this particular The Nation newspaper, and of course pick up a copy like we always say to get you on track, of course. But let's quickly tell you our next paper, which is the Guardian newspaper. The Guardian newspaper has its lead story on the very front page cover, and it talks about the painful effects linger. That's 3 years after subsidy removal, painful effects linger. And of course there's a picture there depicting where these pains are cut across. Let's give you the breakdown to all of this. You have a woman standing cooking, of course. You have where it says budget stretched, choices harder, and then of course you have a mother still sitting with her 2 kids, and of course she's weighing a whole lot of options with what that is in terms of food, transportation, school fees, rent, all of what is needed.
The effect is truly painful. All of us, even beyond that picture, everyone who is in Nigeria.
The picture is just giving a clue.
Of course, I understand.
What electricity is very key, of course.
Every Nigerian is affected because, and they told us that subsidy has to go because it's something that is not really helping our economy.
But we still have
3 years down the line,
we still have
how far is the
some
question?
side or narrative to the fact that it's also not going to like magic. It's years that it's been.
It's not magic, but of course, every subsidy that is removed, it's not something that is. It's not the first time subsidy is removed across the world, and this is a policy that we've taken from recommendations by international monetary bodies like the World Bank. They've told you if you are removing subsidy, you have to have a cushioning effect. You have got to have a palliative. The government told us that they will have buses that would be CNG powered. How many of those buses are applying the road of FCT? How many of this effect have been felt? Every Nigerian is affected, and I don't know if I would say it's a good one. For me, that's my personal opinion. That subsidy removal is a policy that I think needs to be revisited because I don't know how effective it has been so far.
Well, that's what that story says. Let's quickly move away from that story and go to the right-hand corner of the Guardian weekend story there, where it talks about tension between government, press, is nature of democracy, Tinubu tells journalists. And we have a writer that says urge media to refrain from glorifying terrorists, kidnappers. Story on page 2.
And below that story, you see a story in terms of security. It says defense minister seeks unified strategy to secure oil and gas infrastructure, and the details you find on page 2 of the Guardian. And also going below again, you see a story that says Africa needs adaptive security architecture to respond to threats. and that is the Chief of Defence Staff speaking, and you find details on page 3 of the Guardian weekend newspaper.
And just next to that, you have a story that talks about internal checks exposed fake presidential council scam, not system failure. That's Presidency speaking, story on page 36 of the Guardian paper, of course. And below that as well, we have where it says NSCIA demands tougher action against terrorists over Borno school attack. We also have Oyo denies paying ransom to kidnappers, story on page 36.
And still below that story, this one talks on state police. It says, State police, time to rebuild national consciousness. You find details on page 5 of the Guardian weekend newspaper.
And of course, let's go above the nameplate there, where it talks about helping individuals confront life challenges, rediscover inner strength is my passion. That's a spotlight story there. When someone speaking on that.
And then by the left-hand corner, I think that's the last story. It says politics, page 8. How political horse trading violence may shape Osun governorship polls. And that's about the size of the stories you can take on the Guardian weekend edition.
All right, let's take quickly to our next paper. That is the Punch newspaper. The Punch, that Saturday Punch, has its own lead story with a build-up there. It says how SGF requested office space for fake agency. And of course, there's a lot of writer that flows up the story. Let's look at it. The first one says Akome Gbajabiamila under fire over allegations. And next to that, we have Falana 6 probe as ADC NDC demand Chief of Staff at SAC. That's Chief of Staff SAC. We also have the next one there. Says Presidency orders investigation. Gbajabiamila listed as court witness. All of that story contained on page 4. Pick up the copy and find out what this is talking about.
Most definitely. And just below that story, it says Lagos residents count losses after flooding nightmare. And details of the story, you find it on page 2 and 3 of the Punch newspaper. Of course, we talked about how it is a flooding season, and we saw what happened in Lagos over the past week. We just hope people who have been affected would find a way to move past it, and the government to also aid and ensure that it doesn't happen again if possible.
Of course. And let's take stories below before we go above the nameplate, or rather let's take the story actually talking about families laments government silence as hundreds remain in terrorist captivity. We've seen that also. I'll watch other papers, and that story is there for you to pick up a copy to find out more details. And that story is on page 6, on page 8 rather, of the Punch newspaper. And of course, the other stories making the round. Let's quickly tell you the stories there. And then we have below that, where we talked about the Lagos flood. On the right-hand corner of the Punch, it says Emefiele Buhari should have faced trial over $6.2 million fraud. Investigators speaking on that particular story there. And that story is on page 10 of the Saturday Punch.
I'm still telling you other stories making the rounds. Just in the middle, it says Supreme Court voids first bank seizure of GHL oil vessel. And still other stories. By the left-hand corner, it says British court ignored CCTV evidence, wrongly convicted my son of robbery. And that is a Nigerian mother speaking. You pick up the particular newspaper and turn to page 9, you see details of this story. And the last story on the Saturday Punch newspaper, at the bottom, it says xenophobia 500 awaits evacuation from South Africa. And details are on page 2 of the Saturday Punch newspaper, that is. And that's incidentally all the stories we can take from the Punch newspaper this morning.
And of course, we still have the Weekend Trust there for us. Let's quickly tell you what the Weekend Trust newspaper is saying, of course. And we have the lead story there. It talks about Tani Mola, that's leading that particular caption, the deceased named in Phantom Council saga. And then, of course, there's a picture there selling the story.
No, I read a piece on this morning. I think it was by Prof. where he was saying this person is the supposed witness of this particular transaction that has been trending, and then the person is no longer alive to tell us detail. So this is going to be a very long coming months, and it's going to be very interesting. I'd like to see how it unfolds, this particular saga.
Okay.
Away from it, let's go above the nameplate and turn to the right hand corner, where it says family demands probe into alleged missing kidney, and details you find on page 28 of the Weekend Trust newspaper.
Okay, and of course, just beside that story there, it talks about how Nigerian women trade fertility eggs for weeks. Food. Story on page 11. Well, okay, please.
No comment.
I don't want to dwell on this. It's really a shock.
No, it's a sad one, and I think it's like food. Maybe would I say this is because of the economic situation? Well, it's one that is very much mysterious, if you ask me.
Yes, weeks. Okay, so let's let's go away from that story and tell you all the stories making around there. Just beside
by the left-hand corner, it says inside Sunday Igboho's Irekun Security Network. If you want to know what this is all about, pick up the Weekend Trust newspaper and turn to page 14. That's where you find all the details on this particular story.
Okay, and that brings us to wrap on this particular paper and all the stories are about. I'm sure you get a copy of all of this. Let's quickly go to our next paper, which is the Saturday Sun newspaper. Saturday Sun newspaper, of course, has its own story, talking about the disaster management. We're talking about flood fear triggers panic in states. Of course, states across. Lagos is one of the major ones we've seen so far, and we've seen the pain and agony that residents are as they count their loss there. We have what it says with the rider, anxious residents raise the alarm, seek interventions. And we have another one that says state government communities activate emergency response. All of that is on page 10 and 11 of the Saturday Sun.
And away from that story just below, it says from orientation camp to passing out parade, all you need to know about proposed NYSC reforms, and details are on page 17 and 18 of the Saturday Sun newspaper. Are you excited about the reforms of the NYSC and ET, what's your opinion?
Well, this for me during my time, I know I enjoyed my service here, and I'm seeing.
Did you enjoy the military drills? Because that's one of the aspects that's
I enjoyed it probably because I went to military school from secondary school days.
So you already have that.
So I already have the mindset of what it is to be in a regimented kind of lifestyle. So for me, would have been it could be normal, but for somebody else the experience could be different, because for someone who was not in the regimented kind of space would find it difficult adjusting, trying to understand what that space was like. But I like the fact that bringing reforms to find a balance, because the whole essence of the NYSC program is to bring people into new ideas, fresh experience of life, unity, tests of good different cultures and practice across the different states. So it's good to see some of those things coming, so there's a balance here and there.
I think I agree with you, but what people have, some of the critics say, you're taking out those military drills, like you said, some people would be regimented. So where are you taking? You're going to be having soft ex-coppers, they would not have them. But then again, it's a reforms are part of every system, and we hope that reform or whatever it is one that would be beneficial to the people who would be passing through the scheme, basically.
Well, let's look out for them and see how that will work out as well, because of course there's a whole lot to learn, and then it helps with independence. You're now an adult, fully known, and try to take responsibility of yourself. So if you're being guided through all of this, you should understand that it's also part of the molding of process for you to go through tough times.
Of course, tough times they make tough people. So of course you cannot have success without having challenges. It's part of it.
Okay, so that should give you an edge to that. And of course, there's a picture story here of a very popular and strong gospel artist there, where he's speaking on a different thing. This is his own opinion, basically, where he's saying, "I'm not aware taking alcohol is sin." Buchi, gospel artist, and then he says, "Why my new album focuses on unity in the church. Well, that's his opinion, and that story is on page 12 and 13.
Let's take you above the nameplate and tell you a story here that says Supreme Court orders release of FPSO Tamara Tokoni to GHL. That looks like an interesting story. So pick up the Saturday Sun and get the details on this particular story. And incidentally, that should be, I think, the size of our newspaper review. I don't think we have other papers for review.
No, that's the size of it, of course. And as we bring this to you, this is also moving us gradually into the discussions. But before we get to that, we know you now have an idea of all the stories. So pick up a copy of the dailies and find out what the stories is all about, of course. So you're informed, you're on track, and you can give account of what's happening in the country and what policies are also working out to favor us. Let me refer to us as citizens,
as the people of Nigeria.
As the people of Nigeria, of course. And of course, we quickly bring you taste and texture. So we get to Tommy filled up and ready for the conversation, because up next will be taste and texture, and of course, then the discussion segments will come next to you. Please stay with us.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Taste and Texture. This is your super innovative chef, Saadatu Garba. Today, we're going to prepare an easy delicacy, and we will be breaking down the entire process. In this episode of the program, we'll be preparing pancakes with syrup. Pancake is always a delicious and simple breakfast option. This one is a recipe that is filling, delicious, and nutritious. Also, this breakfast pancake can be made in under 5 minutes by anyone. In addition to the speed and ease of making it, it is also fun to make. Ingredients: flour, sugar, egg, milk, salt, oil, and butter. Add a cup of flour into a bowl. Add 2 teaspoons of sugar and baking powder. Add a teaspoon of salt and mix all together. Add a cup of milk into the dry mixture. Crack 1 egg and whisk, then add into the batter. Add 2 tablespoons of oil and mix everything together, then set aside. Heat up a pan with little oil. Scoop your pancake batter and add into the heated pan. Allow to cook for a minute, then flip when the edges are brown. Repeat the process until you exhaust the batter. Serve with syrup and butter, and your fluffy pancakes are ready to enjoy. That's how we end today's episode of Taste and Texture. I hope you found our recipe insightful. Let's do this again next time, and be sure to join me for another taste-friendly delicacy. I am Saadatu Garba, your creative chef, saying thank you for watching.
you join us back on this particular discussion segment. But quickly, remember we brought you breakfast, and I'm sure you're set for this conversation because it's actually timely, and we want you to pay attention and flow with us. Welcome to this discussion segment of Global Morning here on Global TV. Of course, I'm still Anita Patrick. Well, today we'll turn our attention to a humanitarian issue that often receives little public attention, and the plight of widows in conflict-affected communities, particularly in Plateau State, where years of violence have left many women carrying the burden of loss, trauma, and the responsibility of rebuilding their families, of course.
Of course, indeed, Anita. But beyond those headlines of communal clashes that we tend to see and the struggles of women, there are initiatives that are making
all of these conversations
of
going
course.
well beyond the clashes we see, the communal clashes as well. We also see that women are struggling to provide, like you wanted to
like
mention,
for their children, while coping with those clashes. And of course, the economic reality in the country is also biting hard. But one thing is, we have an organization that has been working to change that narrative, and that is the Midpoint Advocacy and Community Development Initiative. And it has initiatives through stability, from survival to stability, and those projects are projects that we've seen that has been focused on bringing psychological change and healing of all the women affected by this particular menace of conflicts.
Okay, well, you've heard from Mukhtar. Basically, that's a whole guide. We've seen this organization putting a whole lot, because one thing is to get injured, feel pain, and that thing is to have that psychological healing to guide the mindset of the people, to tell them there's still hope and there's still light at the end of the tunnel. No matter what you go through as a person, you can still stand tall and make your waves and survive. And of course, joining us this morning is the founder of the Midpoint Advocacy and Community Development Initiative, Reverend Clement Datchet. It's good to have you join us on the program.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, interesting. I see your work. We've seen what you put out, and we feel it's a whole lot, and we need to bring Nigerians to understand how this is playing out for you. But let's look at it. Many Nigerians may not fully understand the realities. Individuals, I'm looking at it from the perspective of the most heated people. Yes, the male gets that as well. But widows face after violence conflicts, from experience working in Plateau communities like you've done through your different advocacy platforms. What are some of the biggest challenges confronting these women or these people in such communities from the work you do so far?
Okay, let me begin by thanking you once again for having me here. Midpoint, let me tell you a little bit about Midpoint, and I'll get into your question.
Very true.
Midpoint was started in 2024, but it's been a long-held desire and dream of mine to get to that point. We have Midpoint Denmark, so where I'm actually based.
Okay.
And then we have Midpoint Nigeria, which is where I am today. Currently, we're running at the moment actually a capacity building for our staff.
Okay.
So Midpoint Denmark and Nigeria, the same under the same organization but two administration.
Okay.
We run them as two parallel structures, while Midpoint Denmark is the supporting organization to Midpoint Nigeria, and Midpoint Nigeria is the implementing organization here in Nigeria. As an organization, our basic idea is to help people build resilient communities and be able to bounce back, especially like in the case that you've mentioned, in crisis-ridden areas. I was born and raised in Jos, Plateau State, and have been a child who experienced the first crisis that broke out in Jos in 2001. Saw a society that was well integrated, almost like a microcosm of Nigeria, just kind of got destroyed by mistrust and attacks and reprisal attacks, and we've seen this just kind of evolve into something worse. So talking about people, what is the aftermath of each attack? It's beyond just buildings that are broken, but also the spirit of people that is broken. So we've seen communities, scores of communities have been affected. Some are living as refugees in their own home country, which is very, very unfortunate. And so when you begin to put faces to these numbers that we often hear, it's even more heartbreaking. We've visited some of these communities. I will take one in particular where we are looking at starting a project in order to bring help and support to the people there to rebuild. It's in Zike, for example, the area in Miango and Kwal area, because Miango and Kwal are two communities, all of the same Irigwe people area that we're looking at. We're starting it as a pilot phase of our project, and so we're looking at starting a project known entitled From Survival to Stability. Because we don't just want to see these people as victims, we also want to see them as people who have survived the most horrendous attacks that have been meted on them. So survival to stability is saying these people have experienced trauma, they've lost material resources. How do we help them to rebuild their communities? And that's what we're working with at the moment.
Now, beyond economic support, you also offer psychological support to victims, and you try to create safe spaces. So why is the emotional support, why do you consider it as important as the economic support?
Yeah, because a lot has happened when people have lost, suffered loss, and it's a combination of several emotional and psychological impact it has had on them. Because these are people who have also lost, like when we talk about the women, we're talking about women who have lost their husbands. Husbands are also brothers, like brothers and friends, and so they've lost, one would say, their social connection and social support network. And they have had to grieve this, and then to talk about maybe not even getting economic support puts a lot of pressure. I mean, if someone loses their beloved ones in a normal situation with life, it's even hard to go through grief and rebounds. You're talking about somebody who has been attacked, violently abused, and left to sort of bounce back. It takes a lot. So we see the whole thing about the psychosocial support or the trauma healing as a process. Some of them are already going into it, but we're looking at it in two ways. One is the direct support, psychological support for those impacted, but also we want to provide training for the local leaders. And this can be religious leaders, this can be community leaders who are able to be trained on basic psychosocial and trauma support to be able to help their people, in this long journey.
I see the idea and all that, so I think that's one of the reasons why your project that you did some time before, this one you're having currently, talked about survival to stability, because you just mentioned the psychological part, which is very, very important and key for me. Because if your mind is healed, it gives you the hope to survive the next day. And of course, and I started the project also gives you an idea to fill up the gap, in terms of all these concerns of people. But let's get to beyond the economic support. The organization places emphasis on psychologically, like you said, creating that safe space. What of the emotional recovery? Do we look at that as well? Because also as important as the financial empowerment that you want to also put to these individuals through platforms like the religious leaders, like you mentioned, the community heads, getting them to emotionally heal themselves first and be able to offer such kind of thing. Also then look at the part of financial support through empowerment scheme.
I mean, let me use, I'm sometimes careful with numbers, because when you reduce people to numbers, then kind of you lose the human side of the story, but let me use numbers here. Like one of the communities where we're starting, the last time I saw the number, there were like 530 something widows that have emerged from this constant attack after attack. And we're talking about over 2,000 children suddenly who are homeless, who some of them are without parents, some are with just maybe the mother that survived. So how do you help these people bounce back? They are also not just psychologically impacted, but like I said, it's also socially excluded. Because they're asking the question, why me? Why am I the one found in this? Why do I have to depend now on others not helping me? So there's a lot that has to go there. I don't think there's like a one silver bullet that you can shoot and then expect everything, and that's why I call it a journey. But that journey, we have to begin that journey of recovery. We look around the world, we've seen nations that have been impacted in the past, even Europe. We've had the First World War, Second World War, nations devastated. But the beauty that comes out of it is the human spirit is very resilient and is able to bounce back and be able to rebuild. And that's what we're looking at, not just the story that is horrific and tragic, but also can this be turned around. But they can do as much, because you have to also say the citizens can do as much. But then there's also the role of the government, that has to come in. And we, as civil society organization, we're trying to be a bridge in between. To be able to bring governance and support to the people who, in some cases, are actually living on underserved communities.
I'd like for us to also look at the nature of empowerment. How are these women empowered? Is it you give them finances, or you empower them with practical skills that will make sure that even when they are back to their homes, they are able to have something, livelihood that they can stand. Like you said, there are lots of widows and orphans. So what are the nature of empowerment for these people? Yeah,
what we've tried to do is to be we do what I call stakeholder-based approach, where we try to not take for granted that because our staff are from the area somehow that they just basically understand the situation. So we do what we call a need assessment. We go there and interact with the people to truly understand what is happening there. And because these things have been happening for a while, we also know that there have also been other stakeholders who have tried to do things there. So we want to understand what have they done so far and where are the gaps exactly. And so when we understand that, we're able to tailor our support to the felt needs of these people. So one of the things that we're looking at is to be able to understand what economic, support have they gotten so far, and what is the gap. What we're looking at basically that we're beginning to work with them on is regarding the idea of putting them in groups. Sort of kind of financial support group, where you would be able to assess what their dreams are, what their desires are, what are they good at, do they have skills ahead of time before now
that they can build
exactly on. And then you can put them into what one called microfinance group and provide some small loans for them. So it's not just economic support, but they're also supporting each other psychologically and
like
socially.
A support group.
Exactly, So that way
it's easy for them to heal.
Exactly.
When you heal together, it helps.
Okay, so I like the fact that you talked about that small groups and how that plays out for them, because the concern most times is you often hear the saying that says when women heal, families recover, because women seem to be the one. And also hear the fact when women thrive, communities rebuild. And of course you've shared an example where you've seen such thing playing out and how the recovery is. Conflict leaves deep divisions within communities. That's why I raised the issue around women being that safe space rather. In what ways can we look at these widows? I'm looking at their mental state, how they can contribute to your peace building and reconciliation project that you are projecting, because I like the strategy you're putting out, the group thing, because when you have somebody to hold on to, it gives you a sense of belonging. So healing becomes a whole thing, peace building, conflict resolution, communities finding a way, no matter what challenge they've been thrown into or faced with. So I want you to talk to us about that particular, how widows can contribute, or the citizens can contribute in their own, apart from what you give to them. What role can they also play to contribute to the initiative you're also doing?
I mean, just because they have suffered attack doesn't reduce their humanity.
Of course.
And that means that as humans, they have certain potentials that they carry with them, and their dreams, they've always carried dreams with them. Because these mothers were one time young girls who run around the communities and hoping that after school they're going to do something, either become a nurse or become a doctor or become a small businesswoman, and suddenly faced with this horrible reality of suddenly like almost your dream being shattered. So the question is that can we be there as a support base for them to dream again, to be able to see that there is perspective of hope, that they can look towards, and I think humans are not like, we're also like understanding the dynamics of human lives, that when you give them the right environment and with the right mindset,
it's easy.
There's a possibility for them to flourish and contribute. We cannot underestimate, in our own context, Nigeria, the role that mothers play. They're the backbone of the whole
society.
And when I look around, I remember there was a time I did a quick assessment around my friends, and basically we would say that our mothers play critical roles in our lives and shaping the kind of people we become. So mothers need to be supported, encouraged. And this is not to look down on us men.
I like the first country, you're the man, so you're telling the story around it.
Exactly, and I think women have played a huge role even in their local communities. There are instances in some communities where you find out that women have always, even without the crisis, have always been that strong economic, social and support for communities. Because if you have healthy homes, it translates into healthy communities.
Yes.
So when you have broken, traumatized women, it translates into the wider community as a whole. And that part of the state of Plateau that we're talking about is the same. Women have always been known to have been very resilient, strong at home, and but now they still see as almost like marginalized people in the society. But we need to get them out. And that's to say how much they can do, how much we can do as civil society. But I think we also have to look at duty bearers. And here I'm talking about government as well.
I was about taking that.
Because the government has a social contract with its people to provide security and to provide basic environment for them to flourish. So we can do as much, but there's a role we know that it's not ours to do. So whatever we do, we try to do it also in consultation with those in authority. Because they have a strategy, they have a plan. But oftentimes, how do you take that strategy and those plans and bring it down to the basic individual who lives in a rural community? Because again, security is an issue. Economic concern is there. Social support, psychological support. The government can create this environment for these things, but the delivery of such things are not coming down to the local people, and that is why organizations as ours suddenly become very critical in providing this as alternatives to helping them bounce back to life. Because in the long run, we believe that civil society have a role to play, but no society will be built on the back of civil society. Societies, they're supposed to be an ingredient in the mix of the entire thing that you actually use to build a nation.
And you talked about government, and government is a collective now. All of us are part of the government. So aside the government at the top, speak to the lower level, the traditional institutions, the small community groups. How can those people also assist the government? Because the government has said they cannot do it alone. So what's the role of traditional institutions, the community, the local community in helping these widows to be able to stay on their field after this conflict and they can be able to be independent?
I think we have one of our cardinal areas of work is advocacy and civic society. And we acknowledge the role of Nigeria's democracy. But democracy is not just a few government officials sitting in Abuja or somewhere in the capital of a state. We need to enhance the participation of citizens. And in a situation where you have a state that is democratic and its citizens are not participating in the democratic process, those citizens actually are acting as subjects, not citizens. Citizenship is different from being a subject. If you have a kingdom where there's a dictator, king, and he decides for everyone, then the people become subjects. But we're a democracy. It presupposes that there are the people, and that's why we go for election. But democratical process is more than going for election. It is also voting on issues, which you channel through your councillors, because your councillors actually, people only think about parliamentary house to be in Abuja and the state, but your local government council itself is the closest. So, but you see, we've had the years of broken system in our government, where at the point local governments were not working. That means that when you take that chunk of governance away from the system, there's a big gap between the state and the local people. And when you have an inefficient government at the state level, the gap becomes even wider. So people don't naturally see the impact of that. And then you find civil society trying to fill those gaps, but they're very wicked because they don't have all the resources to do that. So the point that I'm trying to make is that we need to continue to educate people at the local level on understanding what their role is in our citizens. That just because you voted once doesn't mean that you should go and sit and start complaining. Continue to advocate, continue to push for changes, first at your local level. And your representatives will know what you are talking about at the council level. Take it to the state and push it on to
federal level.
Okay, so I like the fact that you looked at all of these ideas and how this is playing out for rebuilding trust and trusting people to understand the dimension on how, no matter how vulnerable the space is, there are ways to look at it and all that. Although we have some weak policies that we need to also look at. But one concern I want to ask is social protection programs. Because the governments also have their role to play, that, like you mentioned, through the different strata of government. Is this sufficient enough in addressing the needs of these people, the ones we have on ground, the social protection programs that we have?
Well, I think sometimes we have to realize that those we elect into leadership positions or political offices are people from among us. So if they didn't know much when they were among us, they would not magically have all the knowledge. And that's why I talk about the participatory aspect of democracy. And I think that we, who are civil society organizations, we can create awareness and call attention to. So I'll give you an example. When we did the freedom of religion or belief, we did it about 2 weeks ago. We mapped out stakeholders and categorize them into duty bearers, and those are the people who guarantee, for example, the rights of people. So we're talking about government institutions here, and then you have people who we call right owners, which are the citizens, right? So if you cannot talk about rights of people, whether in terms of social protection, without talking about those who are the bearers of the guarantor or the guarantor of those rights, like the ministry. So what we've tried to do in that sense is not just to look at from our angle what we can do, but how to call the attention of those duty bearers as critical collaborators in enhancing the rights of people in Nigeria. And then we also call traditional leaders, traditional rulers or heads, whether they are district heads or they were, kings in their own local area, to participate, because they have a role to play in terms of being cultural and traditional custodians. And sometimes you realize some of these conflicts have ethnic coloration, they have religious coloration, and also political coloration. So when you bring government state actors, traditional actors and religious actors in, you in that way bring one part of the stakeholders, and then the people themselves, giving them a voice to speak and understanding what they go through. So what we did was, when we did a research, for example, to understanding this issue of social protection and others, was to bring the finding and invite these people to listen to what we have gathered through data and say, this is it, do you agree, and what are you doing about it? So data don't lie.
Numbers don't lie, you say.
So what we saw was actually an excitement from the government. Someone said, you've done a very critical work for our work. Now what is left is to map out strategies and how we can mitigate these challenges.
Now, we often hear of emergency relief when this conflict hits. But oftentimes, my concern is in long-term stability. So beyond this emergency relief that we see is always mobilized when the conflict arises, how can we have a long-term stability to make sure that, okay, after emergency relief, what happens next? Exactly. So how can we create that long-term stability to just go beyond giving palliatives and emergency relief at the hotspot?
I think it's one of the biggest problems we've seen if you go to Northeast, because there's also the risk that emergency aid support suddenly becomes its own industry, because there are people who benefit from that. But what you want to see is not a community that completely is reliant only on emergency aid, because then that becomes a huge problem. I think that this is where the collaboration between civil society groups and government has to sort of align, because in a way, it's like the institutions of governance can guarantee the framework for longer term project, like what we're doing with the women. We would love the government in a place that has been traumatized by crisis. How do you help them bounce back? We cannot set regulatory frameworks back to those people, so we will need the government's role as well to come in there and help that whatever we're building fits into the wider economy of society. Because if suddenly we're having these women, into farming and they're producing crops that have economic value, it's not only for them, it's going to be feeding Nigeria. And so it has to find, the government will now have to come in to help strategize that into its wider agricultural plan and empowerment for these women. Because what we want to do is that when these women are empowered, they would also be able to pay for their children's school fees, pay for their health, and other things like that.
Very important.
But we have to see this in terms of the long-term longevity of it. That how do you do it beyond just emergency aid? And that's why our project in terms of survival to stability is looking beyond that. It's saying that how do we invest in them so that we don't have to give them a fish again and again, but teach them how to fish so that they can become self-reliant. Because there's something about self-reliance when you're able to bring people to that point, is that you restore their dignity.
Exactly.
Anyone who becomes too dependent, then you actually reduce their human dignity.
True.
Anyone who earns his bread from his hard labor is dignified.
Very well.
You just took it out of my mouth because we talked about the women and all that. I'm looking at the men's aspect of it because you see crisis-prone areas, you see the men trying to encourage the women, put out and also rebuild the society in their own little way of healing from the psychological effects and all of that. I want to speak about how you help them as the male folks, because we're talking about women all the while. The male folks
they're also affected
because they are affected. We just left June, which is the Men's Month, and their mental state of health, and also the fact that so we have IDPs across.
We have PTSD, where those men also have flashbacks of all this traumatic experience.
Because while we're trying to console the women and the children, because they have to play the tough part of being the tough man, but they also have their breakdown moments where they hide somewhere, cry, clean their eyes, and come out tough. So that process for the men, how do your organization also look out for, since you do the groups, the grouping, do you find a way to balance that emotional breakdown for the male folks as well?
Well, I have to say that as an NGO, we've just looked at where there's been the most felt need in that community, and that's the reason why we looked at the women. And for some weird reason, men suffer, and sometimes they don't survive. Because for some weird reason, you discover that some of the victims, that have died are men, and that's of course not to ignore the deaths of children, babies and women. But somehow, when you look at those who have survived, the most who are left with children are women. But there are men who are traumatized. Certainly, we would find a way to include them, and that's why we're providing the training not only for the women affected, but we're also providing it for the local leaders, so that they can be better equipped. For again, you ask the long-term
responsibility.
If you only provide it for these affected victims, when will this crisis actually end? Is it close in sight that it's going to end soon? So while we hope that it ends soon, you have to keep preparing the people at the local level to be able to have that resiliency to be able to stand. And that's where training the leaders here is important. And I think when they reach out to help those traumatized, they will not only focus on women, they would focus on everyone affected in the society as well. But as a project, which is time bound and very specific, this project is designed focusing on widows at the moment.
Now let's talk about partnerships. Are they particular agencies and private sector that you're seeking to partner with to actualize this particular initiative?
Yeah, the way Midpoint Nigeria works is we believe that we have to be in association with other civil society organizations that have the same values and the same focus like ours. So yes, we have other partners that we work with because we cannot do it all. So you can come, maybe you're talking about the area of, because there's several aspects to this. When you look at the sustainable development goal, for example, we look at food, for all, education for all. You're talking about economic access to financial
core values.
Exactly. So there are different aspects of the S17 SDGs that suddenly will find itself here, and some other organizations are stronger than ours. So we're bringing it as a collaborative effort. Like I would say that we do not have a resource for psychosocial support. So we're reliant on a partner who would come and do the training. In that way. So it's a collaborative effort with the local communities, but also with other civil society actors. But we are just a convener of this.
Okay, so I see that you look at the evidence-based community development and social advocacy. This is one of your focal points of your agency or NGO, and you've looked at peace building, human rights, giving them that understanding of their rights and backing up for them to have a sustainable run treats. You also have a bit of around social conflict issues, climate issues, and all that. Let's look at the issue of agriculture you mentioned for the people in Jos, because your job cuts across the Middle Belt and the FCT. Yeah. And we're starting off from Jos because that's your place where you.
We actually we're supporting educational work in Abuja. For the girl child.
Generally?
In Abuja, Kuje, we support education for the underserved communities. Okay. At the moment, we're supporting a number of students to get access to education. Yeah. So we already have a project going on in Abuja.
Okay, because I wanted to know the focus areas, because humanitarian crisis cuts across different areas. Because like I said, we have the IDPs where children are now, going to school becomes a challenge. So if you're looking at that solves 1/3, if I can use that word, of that challenge. Yeah. The conflict is something that we cannot erode away. This is community areas where it come from the farmer headers. It could come from issues where women will also always falling victims, and there's need to look at recovery plan for them, not just the instant, just like Mutare mentioned.
Of course.
And I like the fact that this is one area you're looking at basically, which makes a whole lot of sense. I want to look at for the youths. How do we build youths who have seen conflict that has broken them, in terms of changing their mindset that conflict might have come, but rebuilding is the major goal if you want to have the same kind of society. It might not be same for you because you know the pain, but it can be a rebranded society for the youths, because now their minds are tensed, they are erratic, that's the right word to use at the moment. So they are just, their minds are everywhere. So that building of their mind for the youth is where I want you to talk to me about. What plans do you have towards that for the youth?
Yeah, like when we talked about the Women Project, I would say it's one of what we would call, because I'm a pastor, so I would just say there's an aspect of justice and there's the aspect of compassion, right? So you could say that our aspect of dealing with the women is our aspect of compassion. But then when you're addressing root causes, then you'll be boiling down to the question of justice and reconciliation. Excuse me. As part of it. And so when we're dealing with the issue of justice and the validation we did, where I said we brought in state actors as well, because they are the ones that can guarantee that. We cannot take justice issues in our hands, but we can call the government's attention as a civil society. As a civil society, we're connected directly to the people, including the young people here. In fact, a large chunk of our workforce in Midpoint is actually young people who are very, very educated and actually have an imagination of a very good Nigeria. And the way we've made it, like I said, Denmark and Nigeria, is not for Denmark to design what Nigeria should look like.
Because Nigeria really is
designed in itself, and because we believe in the ingenuity of our own people. You see Nigerians leave Nigeria, and they go to America or Canada or Australia, and you just give them a good opportunity. They just build great things.
They flourish.
They flourish out there. So why can't it happen here at home? And how can we be part of that? Again, it's beyond this, giving bread. Was also addressing the issue of root causes. So I would remember Jos, for example, after the crisis, what I saw happen. I was a pastor in a ghetto area in Jos, one of the biggest ghetto areas in Jos. What I saw as the aftermath of the crisis was suddenly loss of hope. People traumatized. What does tomorrow bring for me? So when you find a group of young people who have been so traumatized and can't see past themselves in terms of the future, what we started seeing was propping up of issue of drug abuse and all of the vices that come with it. But the tendency sometimes is to focus on the vices and not look at the root causes. So I think addressing this broad-based issue of crisis, how do we bring true justice, in addressing the rights of people to life, to be whoever they choose to be in terms of religious beliefs, or to belong to whatever ethnic group that they identify themselves without being harassed or killed because you belong to a certain tribe or belong to a certain religion. The government needs to guarantee that. And I think it has a cascading effect, where suddenly you would see that some of these social ills or vices that we're talking about begin to give way. Because when you don't have people who have gone through trauma healing and have had post-traumatic disorder, the tendency is that you would certainly develop bad habits at that time. Become dependent on drugs because you want to forget the experiences.
There's a lot of impact on that.
Exactly. So it has, So there's a lot of psychological, social, and economic things that needs to be considered. And what are the ones that are root causes? We need to address them. Sometimes we just address the symptoms, and forget that there's a deeper thing that's beneath there. So that's why we before we do any intervention, we want to understand. So we normally start with like what we're doing with freedom of religion or belief. We did a 6-month feasibility study in order to help us appreciate the enormity and the depth of the problem before we begin to administer. So it's like a doctor would not start administering medication without diagnosing. So the feasibility study does allow us that opportunity to diagnose by listening, by paying attention to what the affected people are saying.
Now, another people who are particularly vulnerable alongside women, maybe even more than women, are people with disabilities.
Yes.
So how has the initiative been able to integrate them into the entire system, seeing that they are also very much affected by all of this conflict?
Actually, we have a section within our project description that does recognize people with disabilities and does give special focus on them. But of course,
what's it called? Plan or guiding, and then this is what's it called? Plan or guiding, and then this is all Nigeria, which also looks at the what's the word now? The dimensional diversity Nigeria operates and the kind of mindsets or the kind of challenges we face, and we look at different, which gives an edge to proper provision to dealing with the root causes and how to get past that and give psychological healing, because this is where that's the major thing we look forward to. And we like the fact that you looked at protecting the human dignity. Human dignity is key, and it's an all-inclusive project from all you've told us so far, and we were saying well done to your job.
Thank you.
And there's something else you want to add to us, is talk to us about going forward. Like you said, it's a pet project, you're just starting. What are your plans? What do you intend to do more so it's more visible, people understand? Because like I said, you cannot roll away humanitarian crisis. It's something that happens because conflict comes in here and there, and it can come in different scenarios. You look at dialoguing aside, building their faith aside, understand are there platforms through these traditional leaders, the religious leaders, so they can be platforms to deal with issues of conflict. So it doesn't resolve to always having to end at a humanitarian crisis. So we need to also call for help, make provisions. What are those measures you're looking at?
Well, we have a clear direction of where we're going as an organization. Like our ultimate goal is to be able to help people take control of their own future.
Sure.
How do we arrive at that? That's what we've been working on. At the moment, we're at the stage where we are internally strengthening our capacity here, because we're just 2 years old, and so we have a workforce that needs to be trained, equipped to better deliver on these projects that we're doing. That it goes beyond project to sustainable life support. And I think this is enshrined in our 4 aspects, which is one, we're there for emergency relief support, but emergency relief support is not our core. But we work in volatile regions where some things will happen, whether it's natural disaster or human-induced disaster. People would need an immediate response before the bigger organizations that are primarily focused on emergency support can come in. We will continue to work on the area of civic education and what do you call it, advocacy. That would always be there. But we'll do it in a collaborative way. First by educating and creating awareness among the populace, because they are the ones that will drive the change that's going to be sustainable.
Okay, I like I said, it's a good start. It's a good way,
great one.
A great idea, because it takes one who has such ideas to sell this and such bold step to look into this, because Nigeria is actually very big. I like the fact that you're starting from your home front, where it's a place you've lived, you've pastored over, and you know the dynamic of these people, and you see the potentials they have to build Nigeria as a nation, not just Plateau State. And I like that it's also going to expand, and they have something here in Abuja in terms of education, which shows that as time goes on,
you might see it in other parts of the country.
The country, in the states, we have 36 states and the FCT.
Yes.
So we look forward to seeing such a powerful stride comes out soon. So we want to say well done to your job, and we look forward to seeing where you come to tell us sometime that the government has also come into play these roles.
Yeah, very
and
important.
covering and filling the gaps of all those concerns being raised around. Thank you so much.
And just to maybe you say that people can follow us also on Midpoint Nigeria on Facebook.
Okay, so they can follow the trend and see how you're handling
Nigeria,
all of that.
Exactly,
okay, so well, there you have it. It's been a very interesting conversation.
Very impactful.
Very impactful that we see initiatives coming up like this, which is actually a very good one, because it's one thing to give instant relief materials, because we've seen conflict issues, we've seen issues around in Benue. You know, it's heartbreaking when you see women, men, children wallow in a whole lot of things, and there's nobody to really give them that long-term support.
Because what we all see is send them rice to them, all of them, but beyond that, they have a life.
They have a life,
in the aftermath.
and of course, the focus is how you're rebuilding, and we appreciate your work. Midpoint's amazing job. We look forward to hearing more and seeing how other partners can come in to build. Thank you so much, Reverend Clement Dachet, for your time with us. Well, we've been speaking with Reverend Clement Dachet, is the founder of the Midpoint Advocacy and Community Development Initiative, for sharing his valuable insight with us. It's a very beautiful way and right to see where this is going for Mutsara, of course.
Most definitely. And the road to peace is not only built through dialogue, it is also through restoring dignity, livelihood, and hope for those who are most affected by conflict, and supporting widows to move from survival to stabilities and investment in the long term, and it's an investment in Nigeria and the project.
Well, that brings us to this particular endorsement. Well, I will see that when conflict ends, recovery must begin, and that recovery must include the women, the men, the youth, everyone who keeps the families together, raise future generations, and often carry the greatest burden in silence. That's why I mentioned the issue around men to him, and it's good enough. He was able to find that balance. Well, it's an amazing conversation here on Global Morning, and we look forward to having you join us on the next discussion segment. Stay with us. It's still Global Morning. We'll be right back.
At Witchtech Cables, we don't just make cables, we deliver excellence. Our products are built with advanced technology, trusted for their unmatched quality and durability. With a wide range of cables, swift delivery, and continuous innovation, we stay ahead of the market demand. We are proudly Nigerian, fully indigenous, yet world-class. Backed by a professional team, strong technical support, and a deep commitment to customer satisfaction, Witchtech Cables is more than a brand, it's a promise. Witchtech Cables, quality cables better than the best.
At Aerogym Shoe Factory, excellence starts from the ground up. Located at number 1 Pound Road behind Nigeria Correctional Service, Aba, Abia State. We produce 1,500 high-quality shoes every single day. Paramilitary shoes, safety boots, desert boots, ankle shoes, back-to-school footwear. All crafted with state-of-the-art equipment and built for strength, comfort, and durability. For reliable footwear that stands the test of time, choose Aerogym Shoes for better product, strong steps, smart style. For inquiries, call 091-264-53399 or 070-3009-3944. or 080-6573-8374 or call 081-3167-3668. Email info@aerogym.com. Website www.aerogymdesign.com. Aerogym. Walk with confidence. Walk with pride.
As rainfall becomes heavier and more frequent, fears of flooding are rapidly growing in many parts of the country. Experts attribute the trend to climate change, which they say has altered rainfall patterns and triggered more intense downpours, capable of displacing families, destroying property and crippling livelihoods. Residents of the Federal Capital Territory insist that while government must strengthen flood prevention measures and improve infrastructure, citizens also have a critical role to play in protecting the environment.
It's actually the intervention of government to intervene and help a lot of states for the issue of flooding across all the 36 states. That is what I think it should, if possible.
Yeah, about the flooding all over our states like Niger, Benue State, and what of you, we have to be very careful about the flooding, because if water come, you cannot even think whether you are rich or you are poor. We cannot take it for granted. But you know that people are passing through a lot. So even though government tell them something like this, because of the things that they are passing through, they don't even care. If you can remember 2 days back, there are things that happened in Ghana. Yes. If you watch all those videos, you see that if you see that people, properties, businesses go down. So we have to be very careful of this.
Across several communities, blocked drainage channels, indiscriminate waste disposal, and illegal construction on waterways continue to worsen the impact of heavy rainfall. Many residents say these human activities have turned seasonal rains into recurring disasters, leaving homes submerged and roads cut up year after year.
Because this is the right time to start preparing for it. Because places like Benue State, Kogi, Lagos, and Kano, they usually experience flooding. So I think government should intervene, and people should also avoid throwing waste into the drainages so that they will not be blockade and cause some of these floodings. So I think prevention is better than cure, so they say.
With forecasts pointing to more rainfall in the coming weeks, residents are urging authorities at all levels to move swiftly on preventive measures, while calling on Nigerians to embrace responsible environmental practices to reduce the risk of flooding. Zahra Unasr, Global TV News.
to have you join us back. Of course, it's still Global Morning. There's a whole lot lined up for you. Up next is our next discussion segment. Like we told you, we had lined up for you. We're looking basically at the issue around disaster management, especially with the warnings, actions that should be taken so the way we've seen flood across the nation. Of course, there's a whole lot of conversation to look at the disaster risks, the reduction, and how we as Nigerians can pay attention and ensure that we play our role and not just keep being the cause of the problem. That's one of the focus we'll be looking at this particular segment, of course. Mukhtar is still here and he understands that the rainy season is a whole lot.
Of course, we all know how the rainy season gets, especially here in Nigeria, where it comes with a lot of crisis, if you like, in terms of flooding, and it's something that has affected communities, it has displaced millions across the country. A very case study that comes to mind is the incident in Lagos, in the highbrow area, which is supposed to be seen as a, but then they're also plagued by flooding. And of course, we know that the government has given warnings to about 19 states, if I'm not mistaken, who are considered particularly vulnerable in terms of flooding in this season. So of course, one way that all of this can be checked is preparedness, and by looking at the risk assessment and how we can mitigate all of this crisis. So that's what today's conversation will be about. How prepared is Nigeria in terms of the warning, and how are we ready to be able to tackle this menace and make sure if we can't stop it, at least we reduce it to the barest minimum. And that's what our experts will be helping us to dissect this morning.
Okay, well, like you said, there's a whole lot to talk about, because we need an expert also walk us through this part. What are the risks? What are the actions we can take? Because as the rainy season intensifies across Nigeria, concerns about flooding are once again taking center stage. Of course, the Nigerian Meteorological Agency, NIMET, has warned of possible flash flooding in several states following forecasts of moderate rainfall, while the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency has already identified thousands of communities across the country as being at risk this year, of course.
One thing is that flooding has become one of Nigeria's most recurring disasters. Like we've said, it has destroyed homes, it has disrupted businesses, it has damaged infrastructure, and of course it has affected the livelihoods of practically every Nigerian who is around that riverine community. So the question now is, how can we mitigate this? How can this be checked? That's what we're trying to unravel this morning.
Okay, so while we're trying to look at all that conversation, we brought in the reports earlier where we saw the challenge, the concerns they're raised by our correspondents, who talked about how it's actually cause for concern and attention, where attention needs to be paid to give us the best bet out of this disaster management, because we don't have a choice but to look at where actions need to be put in place, the right answers, the right persons to speak up. But while we're looking at it, we'll quickly be joined by our guest, rather, by talk about the correspondent, where he will look at, the improved weather concerns and how this repeated warnings can't play out. But let's quickly take this break and then we'll come back to take it. Well, it's good to have you join us back. While we're looking at all of this, let's also tell you that despite improved weather forecasting and repeated warnings, many communities continue to experience the same devastating impact year after year. Of course, so we look at, why do these disasters keep reoccurring? It's one question you need to ask. If there are warnings, if there are guidance to all of this, is this challenge simply about the heavy rainfall, or are there deeper issues of planning, preparedness, and governance that should be looked at, and not just the attention to its raining season, of course? And we need to pay attention to all of those roles we need to play as citizens. And of course, we have these experts who will be joining us all the way from Lagos, Nigeria. His name is Omowaye Pelumi, a disaster risk reduction and climate resilience professional whose work focuses on helping vulnerable communities prepare for and recover from climate-related disasters. He also leads climate awareness and resilience campaigns at Eco Cycle Development Foundation. Well, we have him joining us all the way from Lagos. It's good to have you join us, Omowaye Pelumi. Thank you for joining us all the way from Lagos. How have you been?
I've been good. Good morning, everyone. It's really nice to be here. I'm really excited about the show. And yes, I look forward to us having a wonderful session and being able to dissect what is happening currently and see how we can, share insight on the solutions that can help us move forward as a nation. Thank you.
Amazing. Okay, so we understand your work. It's good enough that you're calling us all the way from Lagos, where we're seeing this very high risks of the flood and how it has affected livelihoods. And Mukhtar, I want to begin from this conversation, or let me start with this, and Mukhtar will come in. Let's begin with the latest development. NIMET had warned of possible flash flooding in several states, and of course, we're seeing growing pictures of people losing their businesses, their houses. Someone said, I saw a picture on the socials where someone said, let me show you what my house looks like, and it may look like it was funny, but it wasn't funny for me seeing it from this end. How seriously should Nigerians take this warning so they can avert cases like this there in Lagos?
Okay, thank you once again for having me. Well, it's actually crazy over here. I am currently in Lagos. I came to see a friend, and unfortunately, we could not even meet because his house was also flooded. He shared the video with me. I saw some, other videos, and it was just really crazy. And then I had to stay in another part of Lagos where the flood didn't get to. So currently, I also have been going around to understand what have been happening causing all this, as much as I have been saying that some places in Lagos, drainage is also a major concern. The drainage system is bad. And then also, I also took note of the fact that currently some places in Lagos have been gathering their debt. And then I also noticed some persons, when it just starts to rain, you see people quickly dumping their debt. And I feel this is also due to the fact that the agency that manage waste management here in Lagos, I feel they are not actively carrying out their duty at the moment. So this is also putting a major pressure on the drainage system here in Lagos. The flood that was being experienced this year in Lagos, last year and the year before, it was not as crazy as this year currently in Lagos. So these are major factor. And also, even with the early warning system that has been introduced, some persons who stays in flood prone areas, due to the fact that this is also they go to some of these places because of their work, their business, and trying to make a living. Sometimes even if they know that this particular place has an issue, but because of the fact that they need to survive, they need to earn a living, they still have to go to these places. So I'm trying to see how we can also not just educate them about the danger of flooding, but try to see how each and every one of us can also carry out our individual role in the society to help reduce this risk of flooding in our locality. Thank you.
Good to from Lagos, which means you understand this picture we're painting, and you, just like you said, Lagos is one area where I see there to be the dumping of refuse is something they need to pay attention to, and then because one thing is, it starts with us as an individual people. We know that some areas are prone to such emergency cases, but let's look at how many people hear the word flood And when we look at many people hearing the word flood, they simply think about heavy rainfall. And then from your perspective, what actually causes this flood in Nigeria is one of the cases we've mentioned, which is the dumping of refuse, not having proper canals where the water can, because one thing with water is you cannot stop it. It will definitely find a way around us. Can we look at proper advocacy or sanctions for people who just dump refuse in the canals where water is supposed to flow, and so that we can avert scenarios where the water is forced to enter where it's not supposed to enter, from your work that you do there?
Okay, so thank you very much. So at this point, we Nigerians, we are very wonderful, and as much as yes, sanctions would work, but I feel if the government can also, put more effort in seeing that waste are being, picked up from the streets, in terms of like from household where they gather more waste. Because I noticed that currently here in Lagos have a coordinated waste recovery system. They have how they sort most household from either Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, everybody has went, okay, they are gathering their waste. And then I also noticed that on Thursday, there's like a cleanup that is being carried around in some parts of Lagos. Shops don't open. So I was really impressed with that. Really, big thumbs up to the government. So, but I honestly wish the citizens can also, understand that we also have like a role to play. Now, by saying this, not just we, bringing out our waste, but also helping in sorting out our waste before we bring it out. And then also, you also notice that this year there've been climate change, which has also been hitting us here in Africa, precisely Nigeria. Places that have not been experiencing rainfall experience rainfall this year, and some places that used to experience rainfall actually experience prolonged rainfall. So these are also, other factors that also lead to flooding occurrence. And then you also, yes, we also look at that. And then also we also notice that some places, sometimes when houses are being constructed, some people build houses without even having thought for, okay, where will this water pass, where will the water flow through. Some people just build houses with just, okay, I just want to just collect rent. So not just people need to also be educated on waste, but also people who build houses, they should also have sanctions that, okay, if you're having your drainage, there should be there's a standard measurement for drainage system. So if everybody come together, the people who owns houses close to roads, shops close to road, have their own, a drainage system that works through, it will reduce these risks that we experience every year by year. Because at the end of the day, it's not like it's going to get better when we are not making any action. So if we make an action towards, reducing the risks we experience when flood occurs, I believe that it will really help us big time in the country. Thank you.
Bringing that particular perspective and insight, but I would like for us to also look at why this happens, because it's become like a reoccurring decimal. We see to have better forecasts, like with the NIMET, they have predicted, we've heard the number of states have even been enumerated who are considered very vulnerable. So with all of this science involved, why do we still get it wrong every year? Why are we not always prepared? It seems like we're not prepared every year, even with all of the science. So what is the disconnect every single year?
Okay, thank you very much. So for based on my research, based on what I've come to understand, is the disconnect most times the last mile settlements. People that stays in the last mile settlement, most of them sometimes don't really get these early warning systems notifications, and those who get this early warning notification tend to ignore it. So this is also a major factor, because you notice that from April down to September, there have been prediction on, okay, these areas will experience flooding, these areas will experience flooding, but most persons don't really, not just people who are in the urban settlement to understand what's going on, but people who, even if you don't have a smartphone, would have a way that which will pass the message to you through your phone. through your even if it's not a smartphone that you're having, even if it's just a handset, and then through also local radio stations also to pass that warning, especially before it gets to the point that it becomes a risk.
The fact that drainage, canals, planning failures usually comes as a major cause of concern, where we see this happens in terms of indiscriminate waste disposal. So one will want to ask, are there ways we can look at responsibility where it lies? If it's with the government in terms of enforcing that people take responsibility to what they do, or is it that it lies with the citizens to understand that you need to also watch out for your environment? Sometimes I wonder if people really pay attention to their daily life or their survival, because where you, especially in Lagos, I stand to be corrected, is you see people sit and you see those canals choked up with refuse dumps, and there's an awful smell, and you see people sitting down there. And also you talked about planning, people building on waterways, which is a concern. Even here in the FCT, I know sometimes, most times when this warning comes, the government's always saying, move away from the water-prone areas where you see this flood will come in. Should drainage clearing and enforcement happen long before the rains even begin, rather than during the rainy season? Because we know that the more these things and the canals are piled up, when the rain comes, the water cannot flow. So what's your idea, or what do you think the authorities should do, and what should citizens do themselves way before this raining season, so we can have lives saved and properties, of course, being checked and kept safe for future?
Okay, thank you very much. So I honestly feel there should be a sensitization on waste sorting. Now, when it comes to waste here in Lagos, even in Abuja, I noticed that most persons just gather it. As long as it's trash, just drop it, and then the waste collectors will just come, pick it up, and then just go. So sometimes I don't know how often this gets sorted out by the waste collectors themselves, but I know that, okay, someone who also I have my own place, and I also generate waste, but I try to sort it out. So I feel if we can have sensitization on that, educating people on sorting their waste, that would also have a role it plays. Because now, at the end of the day, waste that would be recovered would be waste that are organic, that can just be gathered by the trash collectors. And now also, with the trash collectors, I feel they should be, effective and efficient with their duty, because currently now in Lagos, as at where I'm based, once you just go out, you're seeing people gathering waste. It's just almost like every turn you just turn to, you're seeing waste in Ikeja here, and I'm like, this is a whole lot. And then when you ask people what's going on, they say, okay, they are trying to I think there's a lawmat guy, they're trying to get them to come and to track this waste, and nothing is happening. And then when I moved towards, there's a part I moved towards in Lagos, and I noticed that their trucks are just being parked down. They're not like actively carrying out their duty. So now this pushes some part of the residents to, once they see rain falling, they start dumping their waste. So this is also a major factor. And then also, yes, I honestly believe, yes, we can also have sanction on those on drainage enforcement. Now, most persons who build houses just feel like, okay, they just you see a very, the road is stretched and is tiled and all, but when you see the drainage, you'll be wondering like, what's going on? How on earth will water pass through this drainage? So there's a standard size measurement for drainage systems. So I feel if that can also be looked into, it would actually help a lot in lessening the flood risks in most of all these flood prone areas. So waste, drainage, and then also with the early warning systems, there are some persons that don't know about NIMET, and some persons don't even know that there's an early warning system. So I feel if we can have more awareness, radio stations and TV broadcasts, at least to educate people more often about this. It's not just the government only, both the communication, the Ministry of Communication also have to be involved in all of this. NCC also have to be involved in all of this, because we all have a collective role we need to play. So this should be something that we carry it out with a collective effort to achieve a measurable result. Thank you.
Professional to the risk reduction and climate resilience from what you do. Let's look at from reaction to prevention in terms of all of this, because many people hear terms like disaster risk management and disaster risk reduction. And can you explain in the difference in what this simply means from your professional perspective, what it means for management and also reduction, so Nigerians can understand, or everyone can certainly have an understanding to how we can also look at the different ways. Let's have you break that down for us. The disaster risk reduction and disaster risk management. Let's get your professional breakdown to that.
Okay, so thank you very much. So now, most of the times people often mistaken the both concepts. Now, when we talk about disaster risk reduction, it's different from disaster risk management. Now, disaster risk reduction, this has to do with, preventing new risks from coming up, and then also trying to see how you want to reduce the existing ones in the country. And then also in terms of creating awareness, preparedness, and also trying to, like, early warning system, informing people about what is going on. This is under disaster risk reduction. So it's basically prevention, preparedness, and mitigation. Now, but when we talk about management, disaster risk management, now this is more like the practical systems and action that implement disaster risk reduction. So it's more like more on like seeing how you can carry out the preparedness, the response recovery. So disaster risk management is it's that implementation of disaster risk reduction.
Would you say Nigeria as a country, we are focused more on disaster response rather than disaster management? And if we want to see an end to all of this flooding incidents, when should we start preparing in Nigeria?
Okay, at the moment, I think Nigeria, we are heavily focused on disaster risk reduction at the moment. And then I honestly feel right now we can start preparing right now, because flood is reoccurring. It's not something that okay, it's just this year we're going to see this, or it's going to keep happening. And most of the times with risks like this, it doesn't just get better. Sometimes it's it's more like it keep multiplying, it keep increasing. Like this year, we have prolonged rainfall in some parts of Nigeria, which was not so as of last year. So I honestly feel if we can look into all of this, at this very time, it will really help in reducing that risk we experience as a nation. Thank you.
Much of your work focuses on building resilience within communities. And from what you've said, you see this happening in Lagos, you see where people just kind of being the cause of concern, where they need to pay attention to. What exactly does climate resilience mean for the average Nigerian, so he understands where to avert this risks come to play? So we totally just have a way of throwing out these challenges we see on a daily, especially during the raining season.
Okay, so for we as Nigerian, for every Nigerian, I think basically we need to also have knowledge on what we can do and how we can do it and when we can do it. This will also build that resilience that we have almost everybody knows, okay, this is flooding, this is flooding, this is water, my house is submerged and all. So in terms of our work, we have projects in Kogi State where we've carried out to, educate and train people on flood risks, and then also let them know about how to, detect when this is happening and what they can do, that preparedness. We've also done that. And then currently we are also launching our new project, which is going to be in Niger State. Currently, it's on AI and geospatial technology for nature-based solutions. So, but I honestly feel if every Nigeria can not just understand, okay, this is flawed, but also see how they can play their own role in it, and when they should play their own role in it, and why they should play their own role in it. I honestly believe that would build a resilient system among us. Thank you.
Explore climate change and urban planning and how it concerns flooding, because many Nigerians tend to ask whether climate change is one of the factors that have contributed to flooding, or is it the issue of poor urban management and urban planning. So which one is it? Is it climate change, or is it poor urban planning that has made our own situation worse? How would you respond to that?
I think both of them. I would say the both of them, because at the moment we are experiencing climate change, which is increasing the frequency and intensity of rainfall in the country. So sometimes there's some places that probably they experience rain maybe just 2 to 3 times in a month in Nigeria, but these places have started experiencing flooding. As at the latest record that was released by NIMET, we noticed that about 33 states in Nigeria, 33 plus states in Nigeria are prone to flood risk. So this is also a challenge at the moment. So, and then urban planning also has its own role that it helps in flood risk also. So it's climate change. Both of them have a hand. They work like hand in hand together. So both climate change, yes, it also has a role that it's playing in the current flooding in Nigeria, and then also with the urban system in Nigeria also. Thank you.
Of that concerns being raised. We've seen rapid urbanization, where we've seen buildings spring up on wetlands and natural waterways. Let's take the instance of there where you are in Lagos, because of course we know when it comes to the island, it's around the waterways, and of course we still see buildings, and where you see people live in such areas, to cross the major road or from their house, it's becoming a problem. How much has poor urban plan contributed to today's flood risks, especially in Lagos? Likes of, I don't want to mention places, but let's use the island, for instance, because we've seen pictures, we've seen videos, and this has to do from that axis. And also we have houses springing up, and people still live in such area. It's really a cause of concern, because one thing is life is at risk. We float on water. Everything floats on water. So how can there be proper planning in terms of the urban houses we're seeing coming, or the people trying to have a better space to live in?
Okay, so what can be done is we have dredging programs which can also help the drainage system in Nigeria, and also recycling also has its own role it plays. People also need to be sensitized on all of this, and then also people need to understand that waste you are dumping also has a way it comes back to you. If it's not to you, also come back to somebody that is close to you or somebody that you know. So if we can incorporate all this, and then people who are also building should also have informed knowledge about flood risk also. So it's, everybody have everybody have their own role that they are playing. Those who are building have their own role that they are playing. Residents who stay in a particular place know that the fact that it's raining heavily doesn't mean you should start dumping your waste. And if we can have all this carried out, it will help urban planning and also with the environment management too at the moment. Thank you.
Science and public response. I know you mentioned it earlier, but I'd like for us to be more intentional about it. Would you think Nigeria has invested in weather forecasting and early warnings? I know you talked about the role of the media, but how can we make sure that those communities that are not aware of all of these warnings, how can we ensure that these messages get to them beforehand so they could act very decisively to avert flooding in their communities?
Okay, so at the moment, most communities that stay in the last mile region in Nigeria, some parts in Nigeria, most of the times, some of these persons, they might not have a smartphone, but most of them usually have radios, and they usually have like a chief who is like, who also, gets information from the government. So I feel if the government can work hand in hand with NCC, that is NCC, and then also with all the communication providers in the country to see how sensitization information about risk can be shared to citizens, it would really, really, really help. Because most persons that stay in Nigeria, almost everybody has a cell phone, even if it's not a smartphone. At least a good percentage number of persons have a smartphone, and most persons that might not have a smartphone have radios. So if radio stations, TV stations, and also with the network providers in the country can also come around to work with NIMET to see how they can advance and spread these messages, these informations around the country, I believe that it will help those people in the last mile region and those who don't really have access to this information to get this information on time. And then also there are also organizations that also take it upon themselves to see how they can create awareness and sensitize people about flood risk. So sometimes one of the issues that most organizations usually suffer here in Nigeria is funding. So I believe if all of this can also be included in the support system towards most non-governmental organizations that are focused on helping flood risk involvement, flood risk areas, and then people who suffer floods and people who are prone to flood, I honestly believe that that would, create that change, that instead of us being reactive, would be very proactive in our approach towards flood. Thank you.
Just government agencies. I would like for us to look at our traditional institutions, our schools, and of course our civil society organizations. What role can they also play in assisting the government and also raising awareness in making sure that we are able to turn the tide against what we have currently in our response to flooding in Nigeria?
Okay, so like I pointed out, definitely some organizations also carry out work in flood prone areas. I honestly feel if they can get funding from the government, private stakeholders, at least say, okay, organizations who are involved in carrying out this work, or who want to do this work, or who are already doing this work, who have that track record of doing this work, they can get some form of support, because sometimes the government might not necessarily do everything for its citizens, but these other persons are available and they can go to places that even sometimes information might not get to. So if there are funding opportunities, not just providing relief materials all the time for people who suffer from flooding, it's not like it's not a good one, but let's try to see how we can be proactive rather than being reactive. I honestly feel like that would help. I saw a study that said $1
flooding annually affects approximately 90,000 residents in Lagos. Recent extreme rainy season have submerged homes and roads, affected up to 275,621 individuals and displaced thousands. Well, over 40,000 households have sustained severe structural damage and total property loss. And then this is one of the concerns. Let's look at infrastructure and commuting. Like we see right now showing on the screen, where we see commuting is a bit difficult for citizens there because of accessibility. You see businesses, all of those concerns being there. We're seeing flash floods routinely submerge major roads, just like what we have on the screen, and also express, causing gridlocks and all of that. Let's look at the health concerns and where this plays a major role, because people just enter into this flood and try to survive and just pass through. There are health concerns to that, there are economic losses put to that, and we're seeing communities where it shows a whole lot, and I'm wondering the health implication that comes in for this. That's why we're looking at the warning signs and the actions we need to take to deal with all of this. First thing first, we know that you need to look at your cost of livelihood, which is out of the place, and there are some areas where we've seen concerns being raised, like I mentioned in the islands, and all that vulnerability, because we have debris, from coming out from all of these damaged concerns. So from your work and what you do, how do you look at communities who are vulnerable from the statistics we've seen? Let's look at the women, pregnant women who are going through this phase. How do they go through this water concern? Because we see a total, from the what I have on the screen, pregnant women are also affected. We see where this was a graphics given by NEMA in 2024, where they talked about all of these concerns. And then we are in 2026, and we're seeing a repeated path, because we've seen in 2024 we saw 81 locations covering 14 local government areas, where these reports came out from. Koshofe was part of it, local governments including Agbongbei, part of these concerns. So what is the organization doing? I know you talked about governments coming to play, also filling the gaps of all of this concern, but the health challenge for women, pregnant women, breastfeeding women who need to access hospitals, but the roads or the towns are submerged with water. What's your organization doing basically to look at these concerns?
Okay, thank you very much. So currently, we as an organization, we have as much as we've carried out research in some flood-prone areas in Nigeria, like Kogi State. We've carried out research in Kogi State, even in Lagos too. We've carried out research in Lagos, and then also we've done some sensitization in some among some residents in Kogi State. And currently, I honestly feel there's a lot that we can do, but one major constraint in all of this, it's funding is a challenge. Now, currently we are working on seeing how we can, create an early warning system for flood risk residents in some parts of the country. So we have some states that we are trying to map out among to carry out this assessment, and then also we also have some proposals which we have also shared with some private stakeholders to see if we can get fundings, to see how we can carry out not just emergency relief funds and all of that, but try to see how we can be more proactive. And then as at last 2 years, we did some outreach whereby we went to schools that have suffered flooding in some parts of Nigeria, and we educated them. We did a capacity training and did response to flood training on them. And this is how we are also playing our own role as an organization. And as much as there's how we can also help, but having the government backing and siding with us also has a long road. It helps, it goes for us in helping us fulfill our own mission towards flood risk areas and residents in Nigeria. Thank you.
I'd like for us to now look at the economic and human impact of flooding, because when we see flooding, we see that the roads, schools, livelihoods basically are affected. So I'd like to know, how expensive, what is this flooding causing Nigeria? What's the economic impact on Nigeria as a country?
Well, it's actually a whole lot. As at personally for me, I was supposed to meet up with a friend who stays in Lekki, and I couldn't go to meet him because of this whole flooding. It's just limited my movement. And now this is just me out of millions of Nigerians that stay in Lagos. Now you'll notice that most persons their businesses are being shut currently, and then most persons will not be able to carry out their activities. Some cars will be affected. So all this has it has it has its own role that it plays. It has how it affects the country. Sorry. So now cars are being parked, are not moving. Petrol stations are being flooded at the moment. People are not buying fuel. People are not moving. People are stagnated. This is having a toll on our economy as a country. And then you also see people who have, some persons' life have also been lost to this flooding. There are some persons that might not even be accountable for, because of, okay, people, maybe nobody was there as at the time it happened. And then also people who, all these small scale traders that sells around these places would not be able to carry out their own business to survive. So it's affecting every person. Schools are being shut. Students would not go to school. All this has its own role that it's playing on our economy. So it's just hitting at everybody differently, but everybody is getting the hit at the moment. Thank you.
People currently living in flood-prone areas or communities where we see being submerged with a whole lot of things, what precautions should they begin to take as the rainy season continues? Because of course it's the rainy season, you cannot take it away. It's nature, it's part of what times and season, if I use that word for you to understand what my mind's reading. It's normal, it's the season for the rains. For those living in the areas that are prone to water, to this flood, these communities, my heart goes out to them. Is when I see, because you see debris, you see dirt sweeping. The water just comes from a long distance. You cannot even tell. It's just entering into your home. And like I mentioned about the health implications, I was hoping you look at that, talk to me about what you're doing about that. The health implication is my concern. We've talked about economic loss, talked about businesses, accessibility, but the health concern, what should communities like this begin to look at so that their health is not challenged? Because you get to see people down with illnesses that are not even supposed to come in because of these things that flood into their homes, and it's a concern. Of course, reptiles could come as well. I'm just thinking out loud in my head, but I'm really worried about that. What precautions should they take as the rain continues intensely this season?
Okay, so like I saw some of the videos and clips you shared. I saw a video recently, and I noticed that people who stay in flood-prone areas, it's because it's cheaper, it's more affordable for them, and probably they're just concerned about their budget. But at the end of the day, cheap is expensive, because now look at where all this is happening. It's not just the fact that, okay, you are going to suffer flood, but you are exposed to mosquitoes. You're also exposed to chances of you getting diarrhea is also high. So I feel like we as a citizen and residents, we also have a role that we play in safeguarding our own health. Now, the government might not necessarily come down and say, okay, this is what you should do, this is how you should do it, and all of that. But for someone who, for women and children, they are more vulnerable when it comes to flooding. So what can be done is that if you have a child or you have a wife, and you stay in a flood-prone area, there should be an awareness about that, okay, please, if you can evacuate this, if you can move your family out. And then in situations whereby I know some persons can be, a bit stubborn, I honestly feel the government can step in with enforcement, like these places you showed. There should not be children allowed to stay and women allowed to stay in such areas. Go to other places that are not flooded, so that if issues like this happen, it will not be because they are the ones that suffer more of the impact, but it would be as the risks that happens will not be so much as what we are seeing currently. Because there's a video I also saw that a child was submerged, and I was really heartbroken when I saw all of that. And I honestly feel this child might not even have the knowledge about what's going on. So I feel sensitization is really, really key to letting people know that this flooding, it's not just affecting your own accommodation, your accessibility to your where you work and all of that. Your children also suffers the risks that comes from it. Your wife also suffers, the women around you also suffers the risks. I believe if this can also be looked into, it will definitely help the effect of flood risks at the moment. Thank you.
I'd like to know, I'm curious to ask, from your research, are there any communities in Nigeria or states whom are actually getting flood preparedness right? If any, why I'm asking is so that other states who are vulnerable can maybe learn from those success stories. So are there any success stories basically, or it's all gloomy from all of you, what you have seen?
Okay, yes, there are success stories. There are. I noticed that currently some places in Lagos get informations. Lagos State are actually really, really active. I also noticed that there was like an investment that they did recently into flood preparedness to try to see how they can, cushion the effect of this flood risks. Now, I think it's something around the innovative financial support parametric flood insurance. So this was like a scheme that Lagos designed for its citizens. So what it necessarily does is when flooding gets to a particular level, it helps it instantly design payouts for citizens or for communities and businesses in that locality, in that particular areas. So this also shows that there are systems there that checkmate this flood that is happening. And then yes, some parts also I also noticed that with NIMET also, they also give out these informations. I think I spoke with a friend that stays in a flood prone area, and he said that they got like a notification from I think NEMA themselves. They came down to educate and inform them about the dangers of of flooding and where they are staying at the moment. So that was also like a form of information and notification. So yeah, there's some places in Nigeria that have these informations when it happens, before it happens. Thank you.
Discussion so far, it's been a whole lot because we now understand the challenges, the way forward, and of course, just like you've mentioned, the success we've seen, approaches that have been put out to ensure that there's safe landing or safe way to go that can avert the issue of people being caught up in this situation. Because the elderly is where I have a concern. Like I mentioned, also the pregnant women who get trapped in submerged communities, how they can get out of such cases if there are no helps. Those are concerns. So with early warning signs and people adhering to this warning signs, it's one way and one good step in the right direction to get out of such dramatic or chaotic situation like we see. Thank you so much, Omowai Pelumi, for sharing your insights with us. We really appreciate your time speaking to us on this issue, because you've talked about where the government needs to also understand and when Nigerians need to remember that when you're told about warning signs, you need to adhere to it and then not allow yourself be caught up in situations where it becomes the loss of life, loss of property, and then you wallow in self-pity or regret, because when you know you are around the flood-prone areas, proactive step are better than reactive.
Most definitely.
Steps to go with. Well, it's been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Pelumi, all the way from Lagos. Mukhtar.
Thank you very much for joining on that conversation and, of course, sharing the insight. And I hope all of the recommendations that you have shared will be taken not for granted and implemented so that we see a safer Nigeria in our rainy season and even beyond. Thank you very much once again.
Well, from what we see, one message stands out from today's discussion. Flooding may be a natural hazard, but disasters are not inevitable. Better planning, stronger institutions, responsible environmental practices, and informed communities can significantly reduce the risks of all of this.
Now, as rainy season continues, the warnings are already in sight and they're already there. And what you should know is these warnings are there for your own safety and your protection. So do not take any of them lightly. When the authorities tell you to move, please do that for your own safety.
Well, there you have from Mukhtar. You need to do it for your safety, because safety is first. That's the way out of this, and you need to be alive and also have your property stand. So just thank you for being a part of Global Morning. Amazing conversation so far, and want to say thank you to all, both our guests in person and also virtually, who joined us to speak on this critical discussions, topical discussions at this point in time, because they're quite essential for everyone to go with it. And of course, this will be John the Curtis, Mukhtar.
Yes, of course. It's been an amazing ride. It's been very informative and very educational, especially with the issue of unity in Nigeria and, of course, the preparedness in terms of flooding. So I hope I enjoyed it, basically. That's what I'm trying to say.
All right, he enjoyed. I'm sure you also enjoyed it, being with us on Global Morning. It's a Saturday. Like we said, it was a time for you to relax and enjoy the conversation. I'm glad you did and stayed with us all through to this time. Let's not forget, we started with the newspaper review segment, where we brought to you the dailies, stories making the headlines on the front page covers of the dailies, and of course that has kept you abreast with what's happening around you, of course.
And of course, we brought you Taste and Texture, where we brought you that very sumptuous breakfast that I'm sure you enjoyed, and of course our conversations were also part of the discussion.
Okay, and then that's what we'll say. Thank you. I am Anieti Patrick. Thank you for being a part of Global Morning.
And I am Mukhtar Kasim, saying a very big thank you for joining the program.
Have a lovely day ahead of you. Bye for now.